Hello, everyone. Welcome back or welcome to Recovering Out Loud podcast, the show where we get real about addiction and mental health recovery. Today, I sat down with Jiordana Saade, a holistic nutritionist, hypnotherapist, podcaster, and founder of the MindFull Clinic. Jiordana has a degree in behavioral psychology and is considered the top leading expert in eating behavior and also a TEDx speaker on understanding what it means to have a healthy relationship with food. I learned a lot in today's episode, and I hope you do too. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, food addiction, or substance abuse, please reach out for help. Enjoy the show. Please support the show by following and subscribing. We appreciate you. Hey, Jiordana.
Hey.
How's it going?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thank you so much for coming down. I really appreciate it. I messaged you online. I was following what you're doing, and I really like what you're doing.
Thank you.
I was introduced to you through a mutual friend, and you didn't even hesitate, so I appreciate that. You were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's jump, and we're here. Here we are doing it. So I'm always appreciative of people in recovery because I feel like we're really let's get it done, people, type A kind of.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, so I appreciate that about you. And I'm really interested in this, body dysmorphia from my perspective, relationship with food. I think it doesn't get talked about enough. And I'm like, it's really opening my eyes and uncovering a lot of avenues of and also similarities with drug addiction and food addiction and this kind of obsessive cycle that we get into, right? So why don't you start off, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into this field.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's honestly an honor to be here. But my story started when I was very young. So this was obviously a long time ago. I'm in my 30s now, but I was the only obese kid in my class. And of course I was like bullied and made fun of. Like my mom is an Italian chef. And so the way that she shows love is through food. And, it was one of the only times I got attention from my mom because she was so busy, not because she's a bad mother or anything, but I was the only obese kid in class. And when I was 8 years old, I had a crush on a boy and I was playing tag at recess and I tagged him, and in front of the whole school, he yelled, "Fatty caught me."
Oh my God.
And I just remember that day, like that's kind of like my origin story,
you know?
I'm like, oh.
Fuck that guy, but thank you at the same time.
Yeah, totally. So I'm 8 years old and I go home and I'm like, something has to change. So that was the day that I went on my first diet. I didn't know what a diet was. I only knew that the more I ate, the bigger I got. And so I essentially just began to starve myself. Like I would throw my lunches away at school. And I did lose a lot of weight and I received a lot of validation. Like all of a sudden I had friends. The cutest boy in school started talking to me. My parents were proud of me. Even my doctor was like, "Oh my gosh, look at you go." So this kind of spiraled into decades of eating disorders and then eventually substance abuse. So when I was in high school, I recognized that, if I smoked weed a lot, then I was, how people say, weed gives you the munchies. Yeah. Well, when you do it enough and you do it a lot, it almost like takes away because you're receiving dopamine from something else, right? Yeah. And then weed kind of led to MDMA, and I would drop like 2 pills of MDMA and go to class, and then which led to like acid and shrooms, and then eventually cocaine, and that was kind of my Achilles heel. So at this point, I'm 21. I'm living in Montreal. I'm kicked out of university. I'm a full-blown like cocaine addict and alcoholic. I have a bone sticking out of my nose. And my parents were like, "We're not going to pay for you to party anymore. Like there's something very seriously wrong here." So they made me come home. And I was working in this restaurant and I met this man and I got pregnant like very quickly. And that baby basically saved my life because through that pregnancy, I couldn't use the substances that I was using to keep my weight down, but also like simultaneously very addicted to it. But the one thing that where it all kind of started came back with full force, and that was just this very unhealthy, addictive relationship to food. And so I gained a lot of weight in that pregnancy. I was very unhappy. And when my son was 9 months old, I was like, I'm going to get down to the bottom of my eating disorder. And I went to become a nutritionist. I graduated as valedictorian with first class honors. I'm hired right out of school to work with a medical doctor in his obesity clinic. And I'm seeing patient after patient, and I'm handing out meal plan after meal plan. And like literally nobody is getting any better. Because the truth is, and hopefully you can agree with this, like I think we all know an apple is healthier than a chocolate bar, right? Yeah. but we still choose the chocolate bar anyways. And so it really opened my eyes up to this idea of like self-sabotage. Like, I know it's bad for me, but I do it anyways. Right. And so I was like, this isn't an issue that a meal plan is going to solve. I went back to school to do my master's and eventually my PhD, which I'm still in the process of, in behavioral psychology and neuroscience. And once I started to understand the nervous system and understand why people are motivated to engage in these addictive behaviors and why other people aren't, it like changed my life. And then now I work with women all over the world doing the same.
Wow. Awesome. There's a lot there. No, and like I want to dive into so much of it. Did you have a deviated septum when you when you were using too much coke? Like,
no, it just it's still there. Like the bone just kind of sticks out, and when it gets dry, I feel it.
Yeah,
I have never gotten it fixed, but
First question. Yeah. That's where my brain goes, though. I'm like, I got close to that too, and I always used to brag. This is so weird that I'm going to say this, but my nose hair would start to come back when I was a coke addict, and I would joke around that was an indication that I was like doing better because it wasn't like burning off.
That's
right?
so funny. I totally get that.
It's just like, these kind of accolades that we give ourselves because we're just justifying this like unhealthy behavior,
Totally.
Because I don't want to stop. It's hard.
Yeah.
Right? It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So that's cool that you noticed, you had this kind of like epiphany moment where and it's true, like we all have the information. The information is plentiful out there. There's so much of it. It's just, it's like addiction with any substance. It's like I use outside things to heal my insides, right? I want to feel good. So that you're in the middle of getting your PhD right now. What are next steps for you? Like, what do you want to do?
Well, I've written my thesis, and we can talk about that as well. But I've taken a break from my PhD. Like, I have to do my 4,000 hours of supervision, and I have a business that's plentiful. I have 2 kids. I'm divorced, like single mom. So like, I just don't, right now it's just not a priority, but eventually, when my kids are older and I have a lot of time, like I'll probably go and finish. But I think I learned everything I needed to in that moment.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
I want to talk about trauma a little bit because I think trauma affects all of us. I used to think that trauma, and I'm sure a lot of people still think this, or hopefully they're coming around to this idea, but I used to think that trauma was like I had to get abused as a kid. I had to have this moment where, somebody sexually abused me in particular, and I was proven wrong, time and time again by attending therapy. I learned in treatment that it's an experience, right? Trauma is all subjective, if you will. What's your experience with trauma, and like what do you think it is? How do you define it?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in this. I'm sure you know Dr. Gabor Mate, but I did actually a course with him like so long ago before he was like super famous.
Podcast famous.
Yeah, literally. But so a lot of what I know about trauma is a lot of his theories, but my trauma was a kid calling me fat when I was 8, right? Like, I mean, and there was so many more things, like my dad having really high expectations of me, and, the attention that I received from being thin or obese. And I work with so many women that have had very serious traumas, lost both their parents when they were young, and in the system, they've been to jail, or mom's gone to jail, they've been sexually assaulted. And I look at my trauma compared to that, and I'm like, oh my God, like, what's my problem, But essentially, trauma is never the experience. It's like how you internalize it, right? And trauma is anything that takes the nervous system outside of its like feeling of comfort and peace and safety. And so human beings are really cool because we are, we're primitive, and like essentially we're very primitive still. And if we look back on the way that these like tribes used to function, there are 2 things that would make somebody from the tribe start to break down, like mentally, emotionally, physically. And one of those things is not having any value to the tribe, and then not being accepted into the tribe. And so literally, if you weren't accepted into a tribe, the nervous system goes, oh my God, I'm not going to survive. And it starts to create things like anxiety, depression, even physical symptoms. Like, their immune system's going to lower. They're going to pick up diseases easier. And so, me not being accepted when I was 8 years old was very traumatic, right? Because as a little girl, before the prefrontal cortex is even fully developed, you're walking around going like, do I fit in? Am I going to survive? And the conscious brain is like, oh, this boy doesn't like me. But the subconscious part of the nervous system, the very primitive brain, is like, I'm not going to have access to food. I'm going to fucking die,
Yeah, I'm not going to fit into the tribe. And Yeah. And those two things are very closely related too, like not being accepted and not, because if I don't have any value to add to the tribe or to my recovery, my family or my friend group, like I'm going to automatically feel like an outcast.
Totally.
Right. And then I'm using those emotions subconsciously. I'm using cocaine and, you know, other stimulants for me to kind of just quiet that voice in my head.
Yes.
Right? How does trauma, what is the trauma? So you talked a little bit about how it affects, you know, your nutrition and your food and your relationship with food, but can you dive into a little bit more of that? Like how it affects that?
Yeah. So super cool. So, you know, food is our first access to drugs, you know, like nobody's ever addicted to broccoli. You can't change my mind about that. And so
I haven't met anyone either.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I did a lot of research because I'm a very curious person. And I wanted to know why one person would get addicted to food and another person wouldn't. Or, you know, two people try the same drug. I had a best friend in high school and she would be able to use drugs just kind of intermittently. And we were doing the same thing, but like I was addicted. Yeah. Like it was, for me, it was an escape for myself, just like you mentioned. For her, it was just like an opportunity to have a fun experience. So what's the difference, right? And so actually neurochemically, like when we are a child, usually before the age of 7, if there's any type of like chaos in the environment, and there are 10 different things that are outlined in this study where it would be like a traumatic experience or trauma. Essentially what happens in the brain is cortisol gets elevated in a young child, and cortisol literally inhibits the endorphin system from developing. The endorphin system is where we release oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. And so these individuals that have had traumatic experiences growing up, or they're perceiving trauma all the time, whether it's parents fighting or, you know, someone's incarcerated or whatever it is, for me, it was not being accepted. My nervous system and these individuals' nervous system aren't able to release dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin on a regular schedule where someone else would. And so when you have access to that drug, it's like your brain's feeling that serotonin for the first time, and it gets addicted to that piece. It gets addicted to that, like those good feelings, versus somebody who can release these things on a natural schedule. They can just produce them on the go. And so for me, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but for me, one of the main factors is like, was that traumatic experience in childhood, did it alter the nervous system enough to make that individual, when they have their first ice cream, you know, like, are they going back to the ice cream because the ice cream tastes good? Or are they going back to the ice cream because the release of those chemicals, the dopamine, serotonin, et cetera, that you get from that ice cream are literally like releasing chemicals that their brain can't do naturally. Yeah. And so because food is our first access to drugs, and nobody's addicted to broccoli, you see these young children where, and you know, as they grow up, where food becomes a mechanism of coping rather than a means for survival. Like they're not just like eating to live, they're like living to eat.
Yeah. I think you did answer my question. What then? Sorry, I want to clarify one thing too. For people that don't know, oxytocin is like the love chemical, right? It's kind of like when we first start dating, it attracts us to somebody. Is that right?
Yeah, oxytocin is released based on feelings of connection. So, I mean, you can release it with your friends, romantic partners, right, for sure. Okay. But if we actually think about like the drugs that are related to these things, oxytocin would be like oxys, right? Like heroin is very different than cocaine is. Cocaine's a stimulant. And so cocaine's going to alter dopamine, whereas heroin's going to alter oxytocin. And oxytocin is like intoxicating. Yeah, like, you know, I worked in rehab centers for a while, and there's a big difference between somebody who's addicted to heroin and oxys versus somebody who's like an alcoholic or cocaine. Not better or worse, just very different. It's very all-consuming. Yeah.
So that leads me to my next question, and I've always wondered this, and I don't know that there's an answer for it, but maybe you can provide some more clarity on it. What makes somebody addicted to one class of drugs more than the other? I was always a stimulant guy.
Same.
Like I never enjoyed that kind of, Matthew Perry called it, because I read his book, and it was a great book. He talks about oxys. The feeling of oxys was like it would replace all of the blood in his body with warm honey. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of nice. But I never had that experience with it. What do you think separates people? Like, why do people choose certain classes?
That's a really good question. This is not a academic response. This is like a personal opinion. But you know how when we sat down, you were like, you know, we just get it, we do it, done. Like addicts are like, we're go, 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 go. So an individual who's like that type A, who's wired for external validation. They're receiving their validation through doing things, people like giving them praise, etc. It's that go mentality. Those people are really wired for dopamine. Like dopamine is the molecule of more. It's not, people think dopamine is a molecule of pleasure. It's not. Actually, oxytocin is. Dopamine is the molecule of movement and more. And the more dopamine you release, the more dopamine you need. And so it's like you release a little bit of dopamine and simultaneously you feel pleasure and craving at the same time. And every time you engage in that substance or that behavior or whatever it is, the pleasure goes down, but the craving goes up. So dopamine, that's why people get addicted to stimulants, because it's like, it's never ever going to be like the first time you tried it. Like, I'm sure, you know, after years of doing cocaine, it's not even like I was having fun anymore. Like, I was just doing it because I had to. Yeah. But these people are wired for like dopaminergic things, whereas oxytocin is more of a like, I'm going to go to sleep for 3 days and like shut down. And those people might have engaged in total, this is me just making a guess, but I would think that the more severe the trauma, like the more that they want to hide and escape, the more you would gear more towards like, I want to shut the system down versus I want to do more things.
Yeah, and amp it up.
Yeah.
Huh. I've never heard it answered like that. No, I agree. Like it totally makes sense.
Pulling it right out of my ass.
Yeah. But. It totally makes sense. Because yeah, and this one thing that this is just a personal, kind of gripe that I have in addiction and recovery. You know, when you ask people like, what was your DOC, your drug of choice? What did you like? And some people, a lot of people will say like, oh, I liked everything. I was like, no, you motherfucker. Yeah. Like you have a favorite. Tell
Everyone
me what
has
it
a
is.
Favorite.
Yeah.
Everyone.
You can't, I don't know. It's hard to like, and towards the end I got into benzos a lot, but that was solely because it would allow me to control my stimulant kind of high. When I would get way too amped, I was like, oh, and then the anxiety starts to come up and the cops are coming and people are trying to kill me.
Yeah.
You know, the Breaking Bad meth scene where he's peeking out of the windows, like that was me, every time. Right. Yeah. And, so like for me, the benzos would kind of just like take the edge off a bit, but I never really did them on their own.
Yeah.
Right? So, we get into recovery, and you're told kind of we have to like rewire the neural pathways, the neurotransmitters as you come in. What role does hypnotherapy play in that? I know, because I know you deal with that quite a bit, and this is cool. I'm getting into this now. I'm learning a lot. So,
I mean, I am a hypnotherapist, and the main reason why I wanted to become a hypnotherapist was because I studied so much about the subconscious mind versus the conscious mind, right? So the subconscious mind rules 80% of what you do. Like, I mean, some people say it's closer to 98. I'm like, it's a solid 80 for me. And most of the time it is about 98% of your day is run by your subconscious mind. 2% of your day is like where your goals and your dreams live. So like, I might have a goal of, hey, I want to wake up and go to the gym at 6 a.m. every day, or I want to get sober, or I want to lose weight, or, whatever your goals and your dreams are, that's that 2%. That's like where your unique desires and goals live. 98% or like a strong 80% is your subconscious programming, and your subconscious programming is not even you. Like, you were literally given it between the ages of like third trimester when you're in your mother's stomach and age 7. And so whatever the narrative is in your household, the emotions that your parents had, children are very highly intuitive and they pick up on those programs and those systems. And the subconscious is wired for survival, not success, right? And so much of what we do when it comes to like addiction, whether it's eating or drugs or shopping or whatever, it's this survival mechanism. Like the brain would never ever do any behavior unless it saw it as being very purposeful. Like, we never repeat any behavior unless there's a purpose. And so the purpose of us engaging in these like, self-sabotaging behaviors is because the brain thinks it needs it to survive. And so I became kind of like obsessed with wanting to understand how to rewire that subconscious mind. Because when we are, and maybe you can resonate with this, but have you ever driven home and you just like get in your car and then you drive and then all of a sudden you're home and you just like don't even know how you got there? Yeah. Like, you're in that subconscious, right? Most of what we do in the day is in that subconscious programming. It's like watching TV, eating. This is all subconscious behavior. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to reteach ourselves how to brush our teeth. It's subconscious. We learn it and the brain just does it, right? And so if we have a behavior or a pattern that is adaptive for us, like brushing our teeth, that's one thing. But when we have maladaptive behaviors in the subconscious, it becomes very difficult to change, no matter how much your conscious mind, that 2% is not going to outweigh the 98%. And so hypnotherapy essentially works on the subconscious mind. And how it works is you want to get the individual into a theta brainwave state.
Yeah.
And so when we're like conscious and we're acting just like we're talking like you and I'm in a beta state. So if I wouldn't be able to rewire my subconscious now, but if you get the individual in a theta brainwave state, which is like very close to slow wave sleep, we can actually manipulate the thoughts and the patterns and the feelings that this individual has about themselves. So hypnotherapy works on that subconscious mind, and it also works through being able to visualize. So I'm an overthinker. Like I literally just catastrophize constantly all day long, worst case scenarios. Like I literally envision them all the time. And so not many people actually spend enough time daydreaming about like best case scenario possibilities, right? We're always, because best case scenario is not adaptive. The brain is like, how am I going to die? It's a negativity bias. So anytime anything is like a threat to survival, the brain's going to remember it and it's going to replay it because it's going to be like, you're going to die, watch out for it. And so hypnotherapy gives us the opportunity to actually like daydream and visualize as if it's really happening, and the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. And so we're envisioning these like best case scenarios as well as kind of reprogramming the way the subconscious mind thinks and feels. And then together it gives a good opportunity for behavior change. It's not a magic pill though. I think people think, you go to hypnotherapy, get hypnotized once, it's done. Yeah. That's not my experience with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you get there to the theta brainwave through meditation?
Totally.
Is that possible?
Definitely.
But then you kind of, so your part in it, or the teacher or the coach or therapist part, hypnotherapist, would be to kind of guide people through that happy state, right? Because that's hard to do on your own, right? Yeah, to your point. I feel like my imagination sometimes is like, the director's cut of movies where there's just like 30 different alternate endings and they're all bad, right? Like it's just, there's nothing good that happens. And it's hard to catch yourself there sometimes. So that's cool. How long is a session usually? And like how many sessions do you start to see kind of positive behavior, positive reactions to it?
It's so different depending on the behavior that we're trying to change. So one of the reasons why I'm obsessed with working with food addiction is because unlike any other substance, you can't be abstinent from food, right? And I don't want to live in a world where I can't eat cake. I'm not going to be like sugar-free for my whole life. That's ridiculous. Whereas if we're looking at something like smoking cessation, I've done a session, literally one session with someone and they stop smoking immediately because you throw the cigarette packs out, you take a different route home, like so many, you don't go back to the bar, you change your friends. Like there's so many different like compounding factors that would allow that individual to be successful with hypnotherapy. Whereas with food, it's like, you have to engage with it every single day, multiple times a day. And so with other substances, like a session is typically 30 minutes to an hour. I always record it and then you're listening to it for about 21 days.
Cool.
Yeah. And then with my hypnotherapy clients, like it's not just like I see you when we do the hypnotherapy, like there's often check-ins, like I'm understanding, what the triggers are of this individual. It's very specific and unique to the individual person. But with food, my programs are always 3 months to 6 months because it really does take that amount of time to change the way that we relate to food.
Yeah. And it's kind of, my mind goes to this, like, what does it look like you kind of mentioned this, but what does it look like in daily life? So I leave your office and I really want to eat 10 pieces of cake, or it always starts with one, right? And then you start eating, you're like, whatever, fuck it. I'm just going to keep going. Is it sort of, is it like food choices, kind of learning when to stop to eat? What does that look like in real life?
Oh, it's everything. It's all of those things you said. I'm laughing because you said something that was like so perfect, and I just want to take a picture and frame it because that's the key right there. But essentially, like I mentioned, human beings were very primitive and primal. And so when the nervous system detects that there's going to be a restriction of food, it wants to overindulge. It literally bypasses that. The prefrontal cortex is where we have like impulse control, executive functioning, all of those things. Because food is needed for survival, when we have, a lot of where food addiction starts is when people go on their first diet. Like that's where it starts. Yeah. It's because of that restriction, right? And so what you said that made me laugh was you were like, oh, I've already had one piece of cake, like fuck it, I'll start again tomorrow type of energy, right? It's that idea of like me eating is bad and therefore I'm gonna have to rein it in. I'm gonna have to restrict myself. That like potential of restriction is actually what elevates the overconsumption of food. It's so cool. Like, and so like there's so many different things, but I always start off, you know, I'm using hypnotherapy, but I'm also using a lot of behavioral psychology with clients where I'm teaching them how to receive dopamine from other things like intrinsically. So, you know, being their own cheerleader or whatever it is. But a lot of the time, and I'm going to explain this in a funny way. So if you have, do you have kids?
No.
Okay.
Not
Well,
yet.
anyone is listening has kids. I use this example, but you know, if you take your kid to the grocery store, right? And the kid's like, I want a chocolate bar. And you're like, no, we're going home to have dinner. You're not getting that chocolate bar. And the kid's like, I want a chocolate bar. And starts like stomping their feet. And you're like, stop it. We're not getting the chocolate bar. We're going home to have dinner. Then the kid's like, I want a fucking chocolate bar. And they're like hitting their head against the rails. And you're like, okay. Here's the chocolate bar, right? Now what you've taught that child is all it needs to do is just overreact to get access to the chocolate bar. If you say to the child's like, I want a chocolate bar. And you're like, okay, let's get the chocolate bar. I'm just going to hold on to it for 10 minutes. We'll have it after dinner. Like now that the child realizes they have access to the thing, it's not being taken away from them, it's not being restricted, the desire for it goes down, right? And so with all of my clients, and if you're listening to this and you're struggling with like food addiction or overeating or whatever it is for you, binge eating, you can't restrict it, because if you restrict it, the cravings intensify. You have to allow yourself to have it, but you have to create space between the desire and the behavior. So it's like, okay, I just had dinner. I want a piece of cake. I know I'm not hungry. I just had dinner, but I want the piece of cake. Can I wait 10 minutes? Can I wait 20 minutes? Let me do the dishes. By the time you're done doing the dishes, you don't even want the piece of cake.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I met you 10 years ago, because I got into this. I had a really unhealthy calorie counting habit.
Oh, yeah.
And I was fully in sober and, you know, I was sober. I was in recovery. I was doing great. I was running marathons, you know, and that's another addiction, right?
Yep.
And it was during COVID too. And so that was tough for everybody, right? But it makes so much sense. Anytime I've tried to restrict myself with drugs too, there's always been this kind of combating force at it where it's like, I just always end up using more, right? You also mentioned something that was really, interesting too. This idea of once you know you have it, it's like everything just kind of calms right down, right? And that was my, I hate to keep making the cross between drugs but there's so many parallels here towards, drug addiction as well. It's just like, if I was so obsessed with the chase of drugs and alcohol, and it's the same with food too. Like just this kind of chase, this pursuit of drugs and alcohol, that once I had it, I was like, okay, it's there. And then, to your point, if I challenge myself and say, can I wait 10 minutes? Can I wait 20 minutes? What is this about? Do something else, do the dishes. That's a huge one for me. How many times, I can't even tell you where I've wanted ice cream. Ice cream's my thing. And, we've just gone and done something else, or I've gone and done something else. And it's like, I don't really want ice cream anymore. You know, it's kind of gone now. Yeah. It's amazing.
So the entire first part of my thesis was proving that food addiction is the same as any other addiction. So it actually is, it elevates the same parts of the brain, the same chemicals are released, like it literally, they're identical. I'm sure you've heard of the study where the mouse was more addicted to sugar than cocaine. That's Dr. Nicole Avina. She's a wonderful, I met her, she's incredible. But anyways, here's a little tip for you.
I was hoping you'd fix me.
It.
Fix me.
So one of the cool things about, and this is like a brain reprogramming thing, but especially because we can't be abstinent from food. So oftentimes, and it kind of goes back into that subconscious, like when we're eating, usually the cue for us to stop eating is the plate being empty, right? Because we're so subconscious about it. We're usually on our phones, we're watching TV, we're like talking to our spouses, whatever it is, right? And so two things that you can do is, one, practice just not finishing your plate and throwing the last bite out. And I know, right?
I get so much anxiety just thinking about that. Yeah.
But it's true because ultimately, like if we keep doing things over and over again, like the brain is just a big muscle. Like let's take the emotion completely out of it. The brain is a muscle of habits, right? When you're learning to play basketball, you're not going to get every shot in on the first. You literally have to practice. And so with ice cream, because it was also my Achilles heel for a while, what I would practice doing is I would have a tub of ice cream, which I used to go through in one night easily, like not every night, but you have those moments where it's like I've restricted for so long, now I'm just going to eat this whole tub of ice cream. Yeah. And the rationality behind that is ridiculous. But you just have one spoonful and then you put it down and you go, yay me. And then you put it away. Like it's a practice. You approach it as if it's an exercise I'm trying. I'm just going to have one spoonful. yay me, and then you put it back. This is an exercise. This isn't because I want ice cream. This isn't because I deserve it. This is because I'm practicing a new skill. And when we approach it like that and we take the emotion out of it, there's no restriction, and you're actually able to teach the brain something new. So when I was learning how to stop being addicted to food, I was living back with my mom, which is like where all the problems started.
Yeah, same.
Like, my mom literally has like 12 types of pastas ready at all times. It's like an Italian buffet there. And so I would literally open the fridge and say, no, thank you, and close it. Open the cupboards and say, no, thank you, and close it. Like, you have to practice, because the more you practice, the more the brain learns how to do it.
You mentioned a piece there that I like too. This idea of like, good job, yay me, right? This kind of, that's important for us humans. I've learned this kind of inner reward system, because we look for why don't you applaud me? You applaud me. Why look at me? I'm doing great, right? But it has to come from inside,
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about when I'm telling you, like, that's how we retrain dopamine to come from intrinsically rather than outside. Because when you eat your favorite food, you're releasing like 150 times more dopamine. When you do cocaine, it's like 4,000 times. Like a cigarette's this amount, that amount, right? When we release dopamine on a natural schedule, we teach the brain we don't need these big releases of dopamine, because we create little like dopaminergic pathways like throughout the day. So that yay me is actually like really, really scientific, and I make all of my clients do it. Take a shower, yay me. Brush my teeth, yay me. Yay me, yay me, yay me, all day long, so that we can feel like we have this like intrinsic, very balanced reward system, rather than needing these large dumps from other things.
Yeah, and the phone is the big one.
Oh yeah.
I wasn't gonna jump into that, but do you want to like? Because lately I've been more addicted to my phone. I've always been addicted to my phone. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if you want to dive into this, but I kind of do right now. So if you don't mind,
go there.
yeah, perfect. Where does social media and technology play in all of this?
So first, I'll admit, like, people are like, oh, wow, what's your morning routine? I'm like, first thing I do is I fucking pick up my phone. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I have this one all figured out. I don't. I understand it, but it's very difficult. There's so many different factors here. Like, even just the color of the screen, like that blue light is very addictive. So we can start there. The like one notification, like that, it's literally designed to like release dopamine. You're also, if we're talking about social media, getting validation from the likes, you're connecting with people. So it kind of is like dopamine and oxytocin, like all in one shot. It's like the fucking super drug. Like it's like, and so I know some of my clients have these apps where they can like shut it down early or whatever it is. I haven't downloaded those, but when I've been more moderate with my phone, even though like I run a business, for me it's really like first thing in the morning, get up and go outside, because or get up and like exercise, like release dopamine from a different way, so it's balanced throughout the day. So then when you're at your phone, it's not like your only source of happiness. And then the brain doesn't think it needs it for survival as much.
Yeah. I've never in my life felt better after doom scrolling, they call it. I learned that one recently, doom scrolling, this like idea of just constantly, and you're in this kind of, it's almost like a subconscious mode where you're just, getting hit with
hours go by.
Yeah. And so I've never felt good. I always come out of that situation feeling worse, and this past weekend, I was with a bunch of family, and I'm the kind of person too, I think you can relate to this, where once I start something, I have to finish it sometimes, and I'm working on it. I'm trying not to, but to the extent and to the extent of affecting others around me, where I'm kind of isolating, and that's a dangerous place for me, because every time I've relapsed, isolation has usually been the first part of it, and I'm good, no, I'm okay, leave me alone, right? So I can relate to that a lot, and I like what you said about getting outside, because that's kind of the ultimate fix. Anytime I've woken up in a shitty mood and gone right to my computer and been in this, even though I'm doing stuff and I'm getting shit done and it's work usually, I've never felt better, like never felt good after it, right? So getting some connection with nature and spirituality, which we'll dive into, it's important, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about nutrition. I know we talked about food, but I want to dive into a little bit of it, because I'm obsessed with it. I love learning about nutrition and how it affects the brain and the body. The gut biome, microbiome there's a lot of studies and science coming out now that your gut microbiome is like everything, almost as important as sleep, if not more important.
Totally.
Right? Yeah. How does food and types of food affect how we feel and affect our brains?
Yeah. I mean, like, some of it is very obvious in the sense where obviously if we're eating whole foods, so when I mean by a whole food, it's like something that's grown on the ground, like you can go and pick it or from a tree, etc. You know, bread is not a whole food. It has to be processed in order for us to like engage in it. And it's through that processing process that things become more addictive and like less good for us. And so anything that's like whole food based is never really going to cause any, imbalances in the body. So, I worked with a lot of people that have diabetes and they're like, oh, my doctor says I can't have fruit. And I'm like, listen, Linda, we have been eating fruit for like hundreds of thousands of years. Yeah. Like fruit is not the fucking problem. Yeah. And so it is through these like processings of things. And in Canada and the United States, unfortunately, like we have very few laws around like what we can put in our food. Mm-hmm. So Heinz will make a different ketchup for Europe as they will for Canada because Europe is a lot more strict and like we can't have chemicals. We don't want to kill our people, like very basic things. But I'm going to get into like some dark and twisty things. But like, here where we have big pharma, where actually these companies are like working together where they don't want us dead. They want us just sick enough that we're taking a bunch of different pharmaceuticals, on high blood pressure, high cholesterol, et cetera, then we're profitable, right? And so I would just say like the more that you can eat, I don't care if you eat fruits all day long or you prefer vegetables. I'm definitely a big believer in like not the carnivore diet, but I was vegan and vegetarian for a long time and it like destroyed my body. And so if it's a moral thing and you want to stay away from animals in that way, that's different. But I do believe that we need like animal-based protein in our diet. Thank but as God. Long as you're getting like, you're eating like our ancestors would, like everything is going to be fine. When we start to have processing, that's where we start to elevate blood sugar, which increases cravings, which, lights up different neurochemicals. Like a banana is going to release so much dopamine compared to like a chocolate bar, right? So, yeah.
What do you think like eating in the morning is important? What's your thought around that? Because there's a lot of, I listen to a lot of podcasts and there's a lot of conflicting knowledge, science out there.
So it's actually very different for men and for women. And depending on where the woman is from her levels of stress, her hormonal cycle, et cetera, all of that stuff comes into play. So men are on a 24-hour hormonal cycle, whereas women were on a 24-hour hormonal cycle plus a 28 to 30-day hormonal cycle. And so for men, intermittent fasting can be quite beneficial because, we allow the body to go into autophagy. Like you are allowing for processes, you're detoxing, you're breaking things down. As long as the fast is, you're listening to that first true hunger cue, then, and you're attuned to your real hunger cues, you're not just going off of cravings, it's great. For women, the intermittent fasting gets kind of denatured because oftentimes I have clients and they're like, I barely eat anything. I'm not losing any weight. And I'm like, well, you're running on adrenaline. You're not actually ever going into your storage of fat to burn it for energy. Yeah. And so when women have too long fasting periods, plus we have cortisol, plus we have all these things, we're not actually even burning our fat. We're just running on this like adrenaline cycle. And that becomes very dangerous for us because first of all, weight loss is pretty much impossible there, but you're never actually hearing true hunger cues until it's like 7 p.m. and you've opened the floodgates of eating and you've starved yourself all day long. And then now we can't control ourselves. Right. And so I don't know if that answered your question, but I personally not really hungry for breakfast. What I dislike a lot from this intermittent fasting thing is I don't think it should ever be like a diet. So it's not like 21-hour fast, 18-hour fast, because then you're not listening to that first hunger cue. So typically I don't eat first thing in the morning, but sometimes at 9 a.m. I want a croissant and I'm going to eat it. Yeah. More often than not, it's like 12 where I feel kind of peckish. But as long as you are like listening to the hunger cues and you're giving yourself enough time to have a fasting period, it's all great.
Yeah, that's simple. I like that. Listen to the cues because we know they're there. It's just a matter of kind of taking a second and just, oh yeah, I'm actually hungry. I'm not bored. Mm-hmm. The intermittent fasting thing is interesting to me because I went down a rabbit hole like a good addict does when that first got popular like 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And everyone was like, you got to try this. It's killing autophagy is when cells kill each other. Is that, the bad cells, the good cells kill the bad cells. Yeah. I was all in on that. And Dr. Rhonda Patrick, I think, was a big proponent of it. Mm-hmm. It didn't work for me because exactly, and I didn't realize this until you brought it up, it was too restrictive for me. Mm-hmm. And so I would have to cram in all my meals between 12 and 8. Mm-hmm. And then from, probably around 9 a.m. to 12, lunch, I was miserable. It's all I could think about. And then 12 would come and I would gorge my lunch. 8 before, 7 o'clock would come and I got to get it all in. And so I just ended up, I somehow managed to cram over 3,500 calories every day, like over that, probably the max amount that I should have been for weight loss, let's say, for my BMR and all that other science and stuff like that. But I would manage to get like 4,000 or 5,000 calories in like an 8-hour window. And it's like, this is not better, right?
No,
I'm miserable. I hate myself. And, I'm waking up in the morning. I talked about this on my podcast before. I'm waking up in the morning and for so long, the first thing I'm doing is looking in the mirror and like, you're fat, you're swollen, you ate too much last night. And to your point of the subconscious, I didn't even realize I was doing it. It was just so natural for me that like, how am I going to be confident in myself if that's how I start my day?
Yeah. I love what you mentioned about the mirror work, because I also think that that's a huge factor for like body dysmorphia and eating disorders and all the things, because your daily behaviors match your deepest beliefs about yourself, not your goals and your dreams.
I like that.
Right? So if you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you're like, you're a fat piece of shit, like your behaviors are going to match that. Like nobody ever looks in the mirror and is like, oh my God, I'm so fat. Let me get my ass to the gym and like get my shit. You think that that's what's going to happen. You're like, gotta get my shit together. Right. But this is how the humiliation wound works. Like you will humiliate yourself before anyone else can. Right. But that humiliation, that inner critic keeps you stuck in the cycles that keeps your identity where it's at. Right. The brain's number one job is to remain consistent to its identity. That's why we don't have to reteach ourselves how to brush our teeth. It's very important. It's very adaptive that we remember who we are. But if we have a very negative self-concept, no matter how much you want to release the weight, go to the gym, change your behavior, stop using drugs, if your identity of yourself is I'm a failure, I'm fat, your behaviors are going to match that.
Do you believe in this positive mirror work, these positive affirmations?
I do. Yeah. I think that, listen, if you're 350 pounds and you're looking in the mirror and you go, I'm skinny, it's almost worse, right? There needs to be like a bridge, like a gap, a stepping stone where the affirmations are actually resonating and you genuinely do feel good about yourself, because the goal is that you feel good about yourself the majority of the time. The better you feel about yourself, the easier it is to make healthier decisions. Yeah.
But to your point, nobody's benefiting if you're lying to yourself every day in the mirror. Like
it won't work.
Yeah. I remember David Goggins. Do you know David Goggins?
Of course, yeah.
His book changed my life when I read his first book. That's how I got into marathon running. And he would always and I did this too. I don't know if it's healthy or not, but he would say he'd had that exercise where you put the sticky notes on the mirror and it was just like all the things about you that were true. And I think, some of them were like, you're overweight and stuff like that. And I'm looking back now and I'm like, maybe that wasn't the most positive thing, but there was definitely value to some of it, right? Like it would motivate me to do certain things, right?
Totally. And but there's a very big difference between like motivation to run a marathon and like longevity in healthy behaviors. And this is like why I love doing the work I do, because one of my biggest claims to fame is like my clients haven't worked with me for over 2 years and they're still releasing weight. Like usually once you stop a diet, you gain the weight back. 80% of diets end that way. Like literally within 12 months, you've gained all the weight back and sometimes more. But that like motivation of, it's getting me to like this end goal of doing the marathon. Like, yeah, you can beat yourself up all day long to get that end goal, but is it going to create longevity and lifelong success? No, because it's going to keep you stuck in the cycle of restrict or over-exercise or whatever temporarily.
Yeah, I'm happy. To be honest, I do kind of miss it because it was amazing how I felt every day running. But I know there's a good reason I don't do it anymore. You know? It took up a lot of time and energy and food.
Listen, like I was married for 11 years. For the majority of my marriage, I was no longer using substances, but didn't know how else to escape. So I would wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning. I have 2 young kids. I would run 20 kilometers every single day, every day. Like I broke my body. I didn't stop until I started fainting, and I had to stop. It's unhealthy for me anyways.
Wow. Were you at least running in zone 2 when you were doing it? Jesus.
Yeah. I just know like I get very obsessive about certain behaviors, and I just know where my comfy spot is. And then it was weight training for a while and HIIT training. And so now it's just like, if I go to Pilates, great. If I don't, like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. I'm in the same place right now, and I'm really happy that I am, because
Same.
I don't beat myself. I used to always, if I didn't go to the gym, it would ruin my day.
Oh,
And I would hate
I
myself.
was unbearable. Like my poor ex-husband was like, literally the only time I'm happy is when I'm gone running. And then when I come back, I'm irritable. And then if I don't go, it's even worse. All day I'm obsessing about how I haven't gone. And and then it feeds into like, oh, I'm going to gain weight and like all these like ridiculous things.
Yeah. Or you're a piece of shit, or you're not good enough, whatever, for me anyways.
Yeah.
I went through a phase where psychedelics were, a very real possibility in my recovery. And I'm really happy today that I didn't indulge in them. I had booked, I talk about this, if you've heard this before, I apologize, but I had booked an ayahuasca trip, a retreat with like a shaman and up north, and I paid and I was all ready to go. And I'll never forget it. I was sitting with my therapist one day, and she's sober as well. But she's great. I love her. And she posed it in a way that changed my relationship with it. And this is for me. It works for a lot of people, which you're going to get into. But she kind of asked me this one question, and she said, "Do you know anybody that's done it once?" And I was like, I really thought about it. And I'm like, no, I don't. So she said, "What makes you think you're going to do it once?" And because that was my idea, right? It's always, like I said to you before, it's always the first piece of cake. It's always the first drag of the cigarette. It's always the first line. I don't envision myself doing 30 ayahuasca trips, because what's the point of that? I just need one to kind of get me and find God, right?
Yes.
What's your experience with psychedelics in recovery?
Yeah. Okay. So my experience with psychedelics started when I was in high school, right? And one of the things that I recognized about, I'm using them recreationally, fucking around with my friends. But what was interesting and different about the psychedelic experience is that, after a night of cocaine and drinking, the next day you're in withdrawal, you'll do it again, etc. After using psychedelics, like I had zero desire to even smoke cigarettes, and I was like a pack a day kind of girl. And so it's, having that experience recreationally, and then me trying to problem solve, trying to find answers for my clients who cannot be abstinent from food, et cetera. I agree with you, actually. And I had a few clients that were in the rehab clinic that said, they tried microdosing, et cetera, and it became kind of addictive for them.
Thing.
And so it definitely is different for everybody. So obviously, like, work with your therapist, like consult somebody. Don't just take, this isn't medical advice. But from the perspective of eating and why it works, not just with eating, but with substance abuse, is essentially it's going to balance out. It's like an adaptogen. So it's going to balance out a lot of the receptors that make an individual want dopamine. So it's working a lot on the serotonin 2A receptor. And serotonin and dopamine are actually opposite of one another. So when we're releasing dopamine, we want more. We're motivated to move. When we have serotonin, like, we're good. We're satiated. Like, we have everything. It's one of the reasons why when you wake up and you go outside first thing in the morning, you're getting serotonin. You're not getting dopamine. It makes you feel balanced and good and satiated, right? And so psychedelics are going to neurochemically work on that serotonin 2A receptor to balance your nervous system so you're not in craving as much. But it's also going to offer this like spiritual awakening, which is why when Dr. Albert Hofmann in the 1940s first founded LSD, he began to use it for alcoholics in these like treatment resistant disorders. And this is also where a lot of the popular people who work in addictions started their agencies, is through the psychedelic experience, because we call it, I know I said this to you before, but we call it recovery. When we're in recovery, well, what are we recovering? We're recovering ourselves. So when somebody is addicted to something, we are so separate from who we really are because we're escaping ourselves. We don't want to look at ourselves. But when we're doing this psychedelic experience, it's kind of like the spiritual awakening of we see ourselves, we accept ourselves, we become one with who we are, we connect with that higher self, and we begin to love ourselves more. And so when we can facilitate that process, it can be very life-changing. Again, I don't believe in any magic pills. I think all of that shit is bullshit. I think you need to continually work at something and train the brain. But I have seen a lot of really positive results. And my thesis was on using psychedelic therapy for overconsumption of food. Oh. And it was really powerful. And it did, all of the clients who were using the psychedelics in a macro dose or a micro dose were able to not have as many cravings, to change their relationship to food because they connected with who they really are. Yeah. I
was at a wedding one time and I heard one of the best wedding speeches. It was the father of the bride. he said something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. He said, we have two jobs in this life, to find ourselves and to love that true self. To find our true self and to love that true self. And I was like, oh, it's simple. Yeah, it's not easy, but it's simple. Like I can relate to that, you know, and I've done a lot of work around it. And I find today, I'm not, you know, I can love myself today. I go in and out, I waver from it. But yeah, spiritual experience to me, you know, the thought is, I need to have a profound alteration in my reaction to life, as it, you know, it says in one of the literatures that I read. I didn't make that up, but it's true. I react to the world in such a negative way, and I react to myself in such a negative way that I come into recovery and I need to have this, I found that it's essential for me, for me and for a lot of people I've seen. I need to have a profound alteration in my reaction to life. It's like when somebody cuts me off in traffic, my first thought is to go murder that guy's family, right? Like sometimes my brain just goes to this, like we said, these alternate endings in the movie. But I need to stop and have this, okay, it's not that bad, or it's not about you, you know, it works with everything, and it's really hard. It works with, you know, somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, like on a more extreme level. It's like, well, I know it doesn't seem like it right now, but there is a reason, there's a gift here somewhere, right? There's a silver lining. And so that's kind of the way I look at it today.
Yeah, listen, like Friday, my Jeep got stolen out of my driveway.
Another one, eh? Fuck.
And I had a root canal on the same day, got into a fight with my boyfriend. Like I was bawling I was like, this is the worst day of my whole life. And like, I just like couldn't get to that positive place, you know, when it just feels like everything's crashing down. And I know this is like very like first world problems. My Jeep got stolen out of my driveway, but like the way that the brain conceptualizes trauma is what's important. It was like so traumatic for me. It felt like everything was getting taken away. And unless we can change our response to like the things that we're thinking and feeling, like we will suffer. Like that's just the truth. Yeah.
There's a huge difference. I was taught this. There's a huge difference between pain and suffering, right? Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. It's like I can sit. That. Yeah. I heard that from a mentor of mine. I can sit in this all day and I'm suffering, but I can choose to kind of get out of it. It's hard. It's really hard, you know? Yeah. I want to be clear too. When I said another one, you haven't had two Jeeps stolen, but no. We have a problem in the city with people stealing, and I'm smiling about it, but it actually pisses me off. Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge problem. I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay.
How did you get out of that? Yeah. I mean,
I cried a lot. I basically thought the world was ending. And then I have a mentor. Like I believe that one of the reasons that like keeps me sober is that I obviously work with individuals. So like even just what you're doing here, like this is such an important thing, and people who are in recovery should always be immersed in the community, I believe. But I have a mentor, and I basically was like SOS, like, and she kind of like talked me down off of it. And the funny thing is, like, as the days have gone on, like there have just been little silver linings. Like, you know, the day that my Jeep got stolen, the day before, my dad spent 4 hours, the poor man in his 80s, cleaning the whole thing. So we took everything out. So all of my son's hockey gear, this vintage motorcycle helmet that I have, like my $2,000 speaker, like everything was taken out of the Jeep first, right? And so I'm like, okay, like, you know, everything could have gotten stolen. So like you just have to find these little like pockets of, oh, maybe my insurance is going to give me a massive payout and I can get something better. You just have to find the little pockets of joy, I guess. Like, I don't know.
My first thought was that too, the insurance. I was like, oh, I wonder if she's going to get money back
right?
for that.
I'm like, well,
big win. Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. Okay. So we talked a lot of good stuff today. What sort of tools or practical things can people use? If you mentioned a lot of them, but just, you know, what's something that someone can take away from this that they can actually implement in their life if they have a problem, or they think they might have a problem with food addiction or their relationship to food or body dysmorphia? Yeah.
So I've done a TED Talk, so maybe link it up, because I like go through go through like very succinct things, but just pulling from that. Like, first of all, you can't hate your way to a body that you love, like point blank. The more you criticize yourself, the more you will self-sabotage, because like your daily behaviors match your identity, right? The second thing is really being able to differentiate between craving, craving and true hunger. And it's difficult, right? Because, you know, that desire for food is so prominent all day long, and it's used to escape from work or to escape boredom or to facilitate feelings of oxytocin. So I have a little trick that I do with my clients, and it's called the broccoli test. And so if you're hungry, just ask yourself this one question, like, would I eat raw broccoli right now? And if the answer's no, then you're not hungry. And that doesn't mean that you can't eat. It just means that you're no longer tricking yourself into thinking that a craving is true hunger. And that's the important differentiation, right? Because the brain will rationalize and tell you all these crazy things to get it to engage in that one thing, right? Like it'll tell you, oh, I deserve it today. I worked hard. I'll start again on Monday. Like all these crazy rationalizations just to gain access to the thing that it thinks it needs. And so when you can at least be honest and be like, this isn't true hunger. I'm still going to eat the chocolate bar, right? But at least I'm recognizing I'm responding to a craving, not actual hunger. The next thing is, and I mentioned it, but I'll reiterate, but you just never, the last bite is never going to give you anything more than the first bite did, ever, right? Especially when we're talking about these like processed, highly palatable foods. And so if I'm eating literally the most delicious, like gooey chocolate chip cookie, like, or the things that I love the most, I always leave the last bite. It's just a little like trick that I play with myself because it's not going to give me anything more than the first bite did. It has 0 nutrients, right? And so what that does is it immediately puts you in the driver's seat where the cookie no longer has the power, you do. Yeah. You get to go, no, thank you, right? And then the last thing, and we touched on this too, is that like we are primitive human beings. Like we are bipedal. We are designed to be out in the sun, and the blue light is like really messing with our mental health and our hormones and neurochemistry. So like if you can get outside and walk every single day, that's the thing that's going to change your life the most, honestly.
Wow. Amazing. I learned so much today. I really appreciate you.
Yay.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think this is one of those things where people don't realize that it can become a problem, or maybe it is a problem, or maybe it's not. Maybe you're not struggling with it and you don't, but it's good to know. And you've taught me a lot of practical things.
Yay.
That last bite, like I don't need to finish this. I was brought up in an Italian household too, where you don't waste food because
ever.
So-and-so, right? You just don't do it. And so now today it's like ingrained in my brain that I have to finish my plate. And that's not the case, right? Where can we find you, Jiordana?
Yeah, so I'm not a super tech savvy person, but I like live on Instagram. I have a TikTok, I never use it, so Instagram would be the place to find me. I have a website, I'm sure you'll link it up, and I also have a podcast. So that has a lot of I dive deep into food psychology and addiction and all of that in there. So. Yeah.
I'll link all of that in the show. Thanks so much for coming down.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun.
Yeah, me too. That was great.
Thanks for listening. Please help us grow the channel and like, share, and subscribe for more content. The discussions and stories shared on this podcast are for informational and motivational purposes only. This content is not a substitute for professional medical advice, addiction treatment, or therapy. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please consult a licensed physician, addiction specialist, or mental health professional. You are no longer alone.